So, as much as I can, I like to cut out intros and just kind of get right into the meat and potatoes of a video. But I want to start this video by saying kind of where I've gotten this idea from, how it's kind of been percolating in my mind. I was watching another booktuber's video. I'll link it down in the description because I don't remember the channel's name off the top of my head. I've caught a few of his videos and they're pretty good. But one of his videos concentrated around tips for kind of a better reading life, and these videos are a dime a dozen, so it's hard to take any one of them seriously because they mostly peddle in the same sort of platitudes and cheap philosophy. But this one I thought was decent, and one of the things that he advised was to just delete your TBR. Right, just get rid of it. Because in his mind, and maybe a little bit in my mind too, there's something about that mounting pile of books that is concentrated in terms of to be read that seems very urgent. And I don't know that urgency is very helpful. There's so many books, and we're all going to die long before we get to even 25% of the books that we want to read. Which is unfortunate, but true, and just a fact of life. And I think that part of accepting that is also maybe accepting that you don't have to try and race the clock. That maybe it's better to take your time with what you read instead of worrying about the next thing. And I know for me, when I focus on all the books that I want to read, I do very little reading. It's maybe the biggest obstacle in the way of me reading books is thinking about reading them and building a list of ones I'd like to read. And at this point, the TBR is thousands of books long. I mean, I add pretty much anything that I find remotely interesting to a list fairly indiscriminately. And so I'm not going to erase that because I like to have a list of things that I've come in contact with. But what I did want to do is just create a list of 10 books that I want to read before I die. If I die having not read these, I probably won't care much, I'll be dead, but in my living memory now, when I think about this list of 10 books, I would like to have read them by the time I pass from this place. Because they're either very influential, right? They're cultural touchstones, or I just think that they're going to be something that I enjoy thoroughly. So I thought I'd go through this list of 10 books and also try and reframe how I think about what I'd like to read. Because I'm not interested, or at least in an ideal world, I'm not interested in having read something as the main reason I'm reading it. I want to enjoy it in the moment. I think there's sort of an obsession with having read something, and this is something that that original YouTuber says in his video. But I think that's really not the way that I want to think about books. I don't want to think about them as something that I consume and then I'm done, right? I have read it, it's checked off the list. I want them to be continuously shaping me, and I want them to be books that I continue to revisit. The best books aren't just there for one reading. I think we don't really live in we don't live in a culture that reads very much, and I'm guilty of that too. But even more than that, past that, we also don't live in a culture where rereading is thought of as a thing one ought to do. Because in many people's minds, I think it's like silly to them to reread because there's so much to read. But once again, there's that to have read creeping into one's idea of what it means to be a reader. And so, yeah, this is a list of 10 books that I want to read before I die. And if I only get to these 10 books by the time I breathe my last, then I don't know if I'll be happy, but I'll at least have read 10 really great books, seemingly. So, And this is a very normie list, by the way. I'm very underread, as I've said more than once, and so you're not going to see a lot of deep cuts here. I was tempted to add a lot of books, like some kind of hidden, more obscure titles, but the truth is, as much as I love digging through the piles of long lost tomes and finding a great book from many moons ago that no one really knows about, it doesn't really fit a list like this. So first, and these are not in any order, first up is Lord of the Rings. And I'm currently reading The Hobbit, not for the first time, although this is the first time I'm actually reading it. I have listened to it in the past, but I've never read The Lord of the Rings, which is a travesty. It's just something you have to read, and it's not the only reason that I want to read it. I also think I'm going to thoroughly enjoy it, because I know that the things that I'm enjoying about The Hobbit right now are things that just are even better in the Lord of the Rings. Just Tolkien's ability to tell a singular tale, I think, is clearly going to be present in the Lord of the Rings. His sort of whimsy, while toned down in Lord of the Rings, will still be present. But what I'm really looking forward to is the things that The Hobbit doesn't have. The Hobbit doesn't have beautiful prose. It has, good prose. It has prose in service of its tale, but it doesn't really have much of a flourish. And I've read excerpts of The Lord of the Rings, and I know that it does have that. Also, thematic depth. The Hobbit is just but is a singular children's adventure story, and it's a great one. But I'm excited to get to Tolkien at his most thematic, at his most grandiose, I suppose, and get to experience that thematic depth on this epic fantasy stage that he creates, that so many have copied since his time. And I'm just so excited. I think it's going to be coming up soon here in my kind of reading schedule, as it were. Number 2 is Dune by Frank Herbert. Once again, like I said, these are behemoths. These are titans in the book sphere. Everyone and their dog has read this book, but I haven't. I've actually only seen the first of the Villeneuve films. I haven't even seen the second one. For whatever reason, I'm just not particularly interested in it. But Dune is just a foundational science fiction text. It's in many ways to science fiction what Lord of the Rings is to fantasy, and for that reason and many more, I really, really want to read it. Most of these books I've read little excerpts of. I like to do that. I like to kind of dip into a book here and there. I'll pull it up on my e-reader and just read a few pages. And I've done so with Dune a few times, reading the first 4 or 5 pages or so. It's starting off, I think, pretty early with the Gom Jabbar scene. I think I've kind of read up until that point. And it's very interesting. I definitely didn't have enough time to get into it and to really see what Frank Herbert is doing, but it was enough to certainly not dissuade me from reading the book. And I've just heard great things about Herbert's ability to build this world and these cultures, and especially the ecology, right? The environment in which all of these cultures interact, especially on Arrakis, Dune, the desert planet. And I'm very excited to finally get around to this. I don't know when it'll be, but hopefully once again before the last twinkle leaves my eye. Number 3 is Middlemarch by George Eliot. By all accounts, this is a stone-cold classic of literature, of English literature. I don't know a ton about it, but I know that it's a small setting, and that'll be true of another book that I mentioned later on. This fictional town of Middlemarch, focusing on, I think, one female protagonist. I can't really speak much to it, but I just know that everyone who talks about this book speaks so highly of it. I've never heard someone have a tepid reaction to this book in my time watching, BookTube and also just reading reviews and things like that. This just seems like such an excellent novel. I've heard it's very long, but with a book like that, length can be a blessing or a curse. If it's some story that you're really enjoying, like for me, Lonesome Dove, even at 950 pages, I could have read another 950. That's just how great I thought McMurtry's writing was in terms of character and adventure. And so with Middlemarch, I hope much is the same, that even at whatever its page count is, whatever its word count is, that I'll reach the end of it and just be thirsty for more, even though there's not more to be had. Number 4 is Moby Dick. This is another classic, literary classic, and this is another one that I've read, like, I don't know, 5-6 pages of, and it's immediately apparent how excellent Melville's writing is. Like, he has such a grip on imagery. It's insane. I mean, even in those first few pages, the way that he paints this, like, port town, this port city, and Ishmael first joining this new crew. I love it. I love that type of writing. That's why it's difficult for me at times to read modern literature, because there's not that kind of archaic style, and not even archaic, but just sort of lilting style and sort of ornate prose and things like that. And that is just in spades here. Yeah, and I'm led to believe that does not let up for pretty much the entirety of the book, and I'm even excited for some of those chapters that people tend to dislike, that focus on, whaling and the intricacies of a ship, because I know that Melville's still going to describe that in incredible detail and incredible imagery. And also I'm really excited to see the way he works in the themes of obsession and unhealthy obsession in terms of Captain Ahab's pursuit of this beast, the white whale. I think there's a real chance I'll love this book. Number 5 is The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. There's plenty of Le Guin that I'm excited to get to, Left Hand of Darkness as being another, and Earthsea being another. But The Dispossessed, of all of her books, is the one that I'm most keen to get to. I know the subtitle is An Ambiguous Utopia, and I know that she's looking at anarchy, not in the way that we might think of it as total chaos, but just merely being ungoverned, at least the lack of the state, right? And that just sounds really interesting to me. I've heard nothing but great things about this book. I've heard it's very philosophical, very thematically rich, and that's just kind of my thing. And I'm positive that those elements are in good hands when it comes to Le Guin. Even though I've never read any of her work, I just get that sense that she is a sure hand when it comes to writing. Number 6 is Neuromancer, another science fiction tale by William Gibson. I think it's William Gibson. My goodness, hopefully that's correct. This is the foundational cyberpunk text. This is another one that I've read excerpts of, and oh my goodness, talk about prose. It is some of the most evocative writing I've ever read, and that's without the context. I read a portion where this character is, I think, like jacking into the system, or just got hit with some type of stimulant, and the way that he describes that, like, drug experience is insane and just stunningly evocative. Even though I don't understand necessarily every constituent part, it gives me this pervasive feeling. And I'm just so excited to experience that throughout the whole book. I mean, it has such an iconic opening line. The sky above the port was something to the effect that the sky above the port was like a TV tuned, was the color of a TV tuned to a dead channel. I'm butchering that a little bit, I imagine, but which kind of ruins the whole thing because it's all about the words themselves. But immediately you're struck with this like power in the just the diction itself. Number 7 is The Once and Future King by T.H. White. A retelling, a 4-part retelling of the Arthurian legends, modern sort of retelling, although I think it's still set in, that time, but as far as like the language used. This I have not really read excerpts from, but a good friend of mine adores this book, or I guess set of books, and pretty much anyone that I've heard talk about it adores it. It's made several top lists for people, and I'm just really excited to get to it. From what I understand, the books slowly become more cynical as they go on, partially reflecting T.H. White's own growing cynicism due to events surrounding his writing of those books. And that sounds really interesting to me, just watching that unfold. And I'm also one who has grown to sort of enjoy a more cynical approach. Not completely cynical. I still love a good romantic ideal. But I do enjoy some of the more, not postmodern, but maybe slightly postmodern or modernist approach, I guess. Sort of questioning the fidelity of a narrative and things like that. I'm not sure that he's doing all those things, but as far as like, it's not just a traditional hero story. There's a lot of anguish and horror there, from what I understand. Maybe horror is the wrong word, but rough going, I guess. Yeah, very excited. And then number 8 is All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. Another one that same friend who adores The Once and Future King, he also adores this book as well, and he's not alone. This is I believe, won the Pulitzer Prize for literature, and is a sort of political fiction novel. But from what I understand, it's really just a character piece, intensely focused on the characters involved, and on corruption, and just everything that I've heard about it makes me incredibly interested in reading it. And once again, I've read the first few pages, and as has been a theme with some of these other books, the prose is incisive and striking. I think on that first page it talks about that blacktop highway, and just the way that he describes it is just, it paints it right in front of you. It's amazing. And I was an enjoyer of House of Cards for a time, and I don't think this book is that similar to it in tone, in terms of like, I think House of Cards goes way off the deep end of cynicism and maybe even nihilism, but from what I understand, All the King's Men is not quite like that, although it is very much looking at manipulation and corruption and the ways that politics sacrifices humanity, maybe. But I might be off base there. I obviously haven't read it. Number 9 is Watchmen by Alan Moore, with illustrations by Dave Gibbons and colorization, or colorized by John Higgins. I've recently gotten into comics just a bit. I've been reading Shade the Changing Man from Vertigo from the mid-90s, and I've also read a little bit of Bone by Jeff Smith, a little bit of Invincible recently, and picked up a copy of Swamp Thing as well that I haven't read yet, but I have this kind of growing a budding interest in comics and manga as well. And I mean, you can't really get into graphic novels and comics without knowing about Watchmen. It's such a looming figure in that space. And you know, the one thing with comics, and I've been mentioning prose a lot, so you can imagine that comics at times would be difficult for me to find interest in, and it can be. But from what I understand, Alan Moore is one of the individuals bringing good writing to comics. And I'm not even saying that that's necessary. I think that people are not wrong to say that comics and manga and these things are visual mediums, and so most of their strength lies in their illustration. I think that's fair, but why not add great writing to that as well? So with Watchmen, I'm led to understand that it's an excellently written comic and or graphic novel, and that's why I'm very excited to get to it. This sort of deconstructionist superhero tale sounds very, very interesting to me, and I would be remiss not to get to it before the death, the final moments. And then lastly, but certainly not leastly, we have The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. And this is maybe the odd child on this list, not because it's any lesser, but I was kind of struggling to come up with a number 10. Because, I mean, there's so many books I want to read, and many books that are important enough in my mind to put on this list. But The Magic Mountain's always had this kind of ever-present position in my life, just from watching various content on YouTube, and it continuously popping up when I didn't expect it, and picking up a copy myself at one point that I've since sold because I mostly read ebooks now. And it just, there's something about that yellow cover that it had that continued to draw my eye. Maybe because it was a bright yellow. But when I read the sort of synopsis or summary, if you will, really intriguing to me. This is a work in translation. It's originally written in German, but it's all about this individual going to a sanitarium in pre-World War II Switzerland, him sort of convalescing there, and about the people that he meets, and the destinies that are drawn in that place. I don't know much about it past that, but the effusive praise I've heard for it from two sources that I put a little bit of stock in makes me think that it could very well be an amazing book, and one that would be incredibly impactful to read. So yeah, that's the 10. That's 10 books that I'd like to get to before the final drop, and I hope I'm successful. You know, life is short, and it can be even shorter than you expect, and so, you know, you kind of gotta get after it if you want to get stuff done, if you want to experience the things you want to experience. And obviously not everyone's fortunate enough to have the resources to be able to experience all that they want to experience. There's many things that are outside of my reach, but that's the one nice thing about books, is by and large they're within our grasp, and they're going to allow us to have those experiences that we can't have anywhere else, that we either don't have the time or resources or ability generally to do. So that's why I want to become more of a reader, because I want to have more experiences that are impossible in one lifetime, and it seems like books are pretty much the way to do that. Let me know what you think of these books, what books I should get to. Like I said, I want to limit how many things I'm actively thinking about in terms of what I want to read. So for right now, it's a list of 10. But, you know, I could deal with a few more on here.